Today is Tuesday, December 6th. We're talking about what the CDC is calling the worst flu season in more than a decade. Also, the runoff election the whole country will be watching today, and why the Real ID deadline was extended again. Plus, how a rental car company is making amends to customers wrongly accused of stealing cars. A dramatic celebrity defamation case back in court. And ever heard of Goblin mode? Well, thousands of people say it defines 2022. Those stories and more news coming up. Welcome to The Newsworthy. All the day's news in around 10 minutes. Fast, fair, fun, and on the go. I'm Erica Mandy. Thanks so much for being here. You ready? Let's do this. At the end of what's been a long, contentious election year, voters in Georgia have another decision to make. Send Democratic Senator Raphael Warnock back to Washington, or go with the Republican political outsider Herschel Walker. Georgia's Senate runoff is finally happening today, since last month's race was too close to call by Georgia's standards. Already, nearly 1.9 million people in Georgia have voted early in this runoff election, topping early voting records in the state. This could have something to do with all the time and money being spent in Georgia right now. National groups are pouring millions of dollars into this contest. In fact, as Reuters reports, this race has become the most expensive one in the 2022 midterms. So what exactly is at stake here? Well, if Republican Herschel Walker wins, the Senate will once again be split 50-50. Democrats will still be considered in control since Vice President Harris is the tie-breaking vote needed to pass any bills. But if Democratic Senator Raphael Warnock wins, Dems will have 51 votes as compared to Republicans' 49. Democrats would have the majorities on key committees instead of being evenly split, and it would be easier for them to approve President Biden's nominees like judges and cabinet officials. Georgia election officials say we might know results of the runoff as soon as tonight, so stay tuned. The U.S. is now dealing with the most hospitalizations from flu that it's seen in a decade for this time of year. The CDC says nearly every state is recording high or very high levels of flu activity. And right now, it's especially hard on seniors 65 and older and kids under 4. As you know, all this comes as American hospital systems are full of patients fighting off other respiratory illnesses too, like RSV and COVID-19. The CDC has seen signs RSV may have hit a peak in parts of the country, but the flu just seems to be replacing the threat. And many hospitals are at capacity. The Biden administration says it will give local health systems extra resources and personnel to help out, but for now at least, it's not declaring a public health emergency. Also, to ease the strain on hospitals, top health officials are calling on Americans to get their flu vaccines. Vaccination rates are apparently lower now than they were this time last year, even though the infection rates are way up. Good news for people who do choose to get vaccinated. The CDC says this year's flu shot seems to be a good match for the strains that are circulating right now. And even if the shot does not keep you from getting sick, it could keep you from getting a severe case. The American Medical Association also reminds people there are antiviral treatments available for the flu, so experts suggest going to the doctor to get tested and ask about a prescription if you test positive. By the way, we talked with 2 different experts about the so-called triple-demic in our special edition Saturday episode over the weekend. Check it out for why this year seems different, advice for parents, and more. Ukraine may have just raised the stakes in the war against Russia. Now it's no longer just Russia invading Ukraine. This week, officials from both sides confirmed 2 Russian military bases were attacked hundreds of miles inside Russia, and Ukrainian drones were apparently to blame. Ukraine says one of the military bases hit is a staging ground for Russia's missile attacks on Ukrainian infrastructure, the attacks that have recently left millions of Ukrainians without light, heat, or water this winter. Well, soon after the attacks in Russia, the Russian military launched another major barrage of missiles at Ukrainian cities. And once again, power was knocked out in several regions. Here in the U.S., the White House reiterated its plans to keep sending aid so Ukraine can better defend itself. To be continued. COVID-19 relief benefits might have ended up in the hands of Chinese government hackers. The Secret Service told NBC News a hacking group stole at least $20 million in benefits from Small Business Administration loans and unemployment insurance from more than a dozen states. This is the first known instance of pandemic fraud that's been linked to foreign, state-sponsored cyber criminals. But it might not be the only instance of it. U.S. law enforcement officials and cybersecurity experts tell NBC News this actually may just be the tip of the iceberg. There are still hundreds of open investigations that include suspects from inside and outside the U.S. Since the rollout of pandemic relief money in 2020, billions have been stolen. Earlier this year, the Secret Service said it had recovered nearly $300 million of it so far, and it's working to get the rest. The deadline to get a real ID driver's license has just been pushed back again. After multiple delays over the years, including 2 because of the pandemic, you now have another 2 years. The Department of Homeland Security says you now have until May of 2025 to get the security-enhanced driver's license known as the Real ID. As a reminder, the Real ID Act is a post-September 11th law meant to increase the minimum security standards for driver's license and ID cards in every state. The big thing to remember is when the deadline finally arrives in 2025 or beyond, you won't be able to use a driver's license without the enhancements to fly within the U.S. You'll need a Real ID or other approved document like a passport. The TSA will eventually be checking for these. About half of Americans with a license or state identification card are already Real ID compliant, but federal authorities decided not enough people were ready for the change to happen in just months, so they delayed it again. All right, we have more news still coming up, but first, a quick break for our sponsor. I love to have just a couple of new things in my closet this time of year that can go with everything so that I have a few more options and can feel really put together for any holiday gatherings. Well, for chic and comfortable flats that can easily be dressed up and dressed down for any kind of seasonal gathering, shop Rothy's. Or for those nights in this winter, Rothy's just released the coziest merino wool slippers that, by the way, would also make a great gift. I love merino wool. My first pair of Rothy's flats were merino wool, and they've been comfortable from day one, and they still are today, years later. Yes, slippers or not, you can count on Rothy's shoes to be comfortable right out of the box. And they have a lot of options, from loafers to ankle boots to sneakers for women and men, and more. So get stylish shoes versatile and durable enough to wear all the time with Rothy's. Get $20 off your first purchase at rothys.com/newsworthy. That's ROTHYS, rothys.com/newsworthy. Hollywood is saying goodbye to one of the most prolific actresses of the 1980s and 90s. Kirstie Alley died at the age of 71. The star was arguably best known for her role on the TV sitcom Cheers, but she was also in movies like Look Who's Talking. And more recently, she was in reality game shows like Dancing with the Stars and The Masked Singer. Alley's family members say she passed away after a brief battle with cancer, which she only recently discovered. But they say she lived life like it was one big adventure and inspired them to do the same. The legal drama between Johnny Depp and Amber Heard is not over just yet. The divorced celebrity couple's ugly defamation fight in court continues now that Heard has officially appealed the ruling. The jury members in the initial high-profile case took Depp's side in the trial, ordering Heard to pay more than $10 million to her ex-husband. The jury ruled that Heard defamed Depp when she claimed he abused her during their marriage. In their appeal, Heard's attorneys raised a number of issues. They said the trial should have been held in California, not in Virginia. They also say the judge was wrong for not allowing them to show some important evidence. Heard did not completely lose her case against Depp, however. The jury also ruled that Depp defamed his ex-wife as well, so he was ordered to pay Heard $2 million. Depp filed an appeal to that ruling already. Their case now goes to a 3-judge Court of Appeals panel for decisions. No word yet on when those decisions could come, though. Car rental company Hertz is trying to make things right with people who rented their cars and then were accused of stealing them, some of whom even ended up getting arrested and thrown in jail. Just this week, the company agreed to pay $168 million to settle more than 300 different claims. So how did this all happen in the first place? Well, dozens of customers say Hertz had flaws in the way they reported thefts. Like, sometimes customers would extend their vehicle rentals, but Hertz would not update its system. Then the company employees would mistakenly file police reports, sending officers hunting for their vehicles and the renters. Police backed that up, saying Hertz wrongly claimed customers had not paid, failed to track its own vehicle inventory, and never corrected false reports. As you can imagine, things got pretty scary at times. Some of those who sued said they were even held at gunpoint by police because of the company's errors. And one person said it took 2 years to clean up their legal charges. All that said, the CEO of Hertz pointed out that the cases involved 1/100th of 1% of all their customer transactions. And now the company says it's taken new steps to modernize and update policies to prevent similar mistakes from happening again. The votes are in, and the Oxford word of the year is actually a slang term, goblin mode. It's defined as the type of behavior which is unapologetically self-indulgent, lazy, slovenly, or greedy. Think munching snacks in bed without caring about the crummy mess. Binge-watching television mindlessly for hours without caring about doing anything else all day. All of that could be considered someone going goblin mode. The term was first mentioned in 2009, but it wasn't until the pandemic and the lockdowns that goblin mode found its place. As the Oxford writers explain, quote, it captured the prevailing mood of individuals who rejected the idea of returning to normal life. This year was the first time the public selected Oxford's word of the year. People got to vote from 3 finalists selected by Oxford Language. Goblin mode took first, with metaverse and the hashtag #IStandWith coming in as runner-ups. That's it for the main news today, so now it's time for Trivia Tuesday, when we ask a different trivia question every week. But first, this podcast is sponsored by KiwiCo. This is the first holiday season that my son will be old enough to engage with us and really enjoy the season with us. And so when I'm thinking about what gifts to give him or the other kids in our extended family, I love knowing that KiwiCo always sparks fun and excitement for kids of all ages every time. KiwiCo delivers super cool science, technology, and art projects for kids. And it's truly unique to each kid. They have 9 different subscription lines for different ages and categories. My 1-year-old's experience so far with KiwiCo has been so positive that I bought my 5-year-old niece a 3-month subscription last holiday season, and I'm so excited to do it again because I heard all about how much she loved it. Plus, I really appreciate knowing KiwiCo uses high-quality materials. And there's no commitment, so you can pause or cancel your subscription anytime. Give awesome this holiday with KiwiCo. And listen up, because you can get your first month free on any crate line at kiwico.com/newsworthy. That's your first month free at KIWICO.com, kiwico.com/newsworthy. Okay, now back to Trivia Tuesday. Today's trivia question is, which Beatles single was #1 on the Billboard charts for the longest stretch of time? You can answer the question and play along on Instagram. Find and follow us at NewsworthyPod and look for the trivia quiz in our Instagram stories today. As for last week's trivia question, in the 1970s, the Village People created a tune honoring which nonprofit? The answer is YMCA. It's considered by many to be one of the greatest disco grooves of all time. And after the song came out, YMCA membership numbers soared through the roof. Of course, there's a lot more to the why than just the song. Did you know the sport of basketball was invented by a YMCA instructor back in the year 1891? The sport of volleyball was also invented at a YMCA just a few years later in 1895. The original Young Men's Christian Association started in London, England in 1844. The first YMCA opened its doors in the U.S. in 1851. Today, the Y has grown into a global network with facilities in more than 120 different countries around the world. Well, thank you for listening today. We'll be back with another news roundup tomorrow. Until then, have a great day.